Victoria, take a seat. Good evening and welcome everybody to this Employment Committee meeting. Do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we've received apologies from Councillor Gordon and Councillor Tapper. Councillor Noble will be substituting for Councillor Tapper, and I believe Councillor Galliford is delayed by traffic.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, so we have two sets of minutes to review. First to the 6th of April. Does anyone have anything to raise on those? No? Okay, so can we agree we can approve them? Thank you. And there's a set of minutes for the 10th of May as well. Anyone have anything to raise on those? Okay, so we can agree those? Lovely, thank you. So I should sign them, right. I won't be a novice next time. I won't be able to use that excuse either.
Just so you know, Councillor Galliford's online. Just so you know.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we are on to agenda item 3, which is any declarations of interest. No? Okay, let's go on to agenda item 4 then, which is the updated pay settlement procedure. And I think Louise is going to take us through it.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an updated pay settlement procedure. In Annex A, you will find the updated procedure, and in Annex B, you'll find the original procedure. But just to give you some outline with regard to the changes. So what we've looked to do here is actually build in some upfront discussion around the pay negotiations so that we can have those conversations before coming into committee to make the actual decision. We've also looked at putting a pay settlement forward for a 2-year period rather than for one. And again, we've put in a revised timetable, again with the view that we'd be looking to do this fairly early in the year so that we have this completed ready for budget setting in normally in February annually every year. So those are the sort of key changes. I appreciate councillors may have questions, but that's it, Chair. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions? Councillor McLafferty?
Thanks, Chair. It talks about if the Joint Staff Consultative Group can't agree, but it doesn't give any indication of what can't agree means. And although that sounds a bit dumb, what I mean is, does it have to be unanimous, or what if one councillor disagrees but the other councillors agree, or what's the split? What if one councillor does but the staff do, and therefore there's a majority? You know, there's no kind of definition of what does agree or disagree mean.
Chair, I can
Yeah,
just come back
yeah.
just for a moment. I know that there is that is clearly set out in the Constitution with regard to what that should be, but we should add that and make sure that it's actually noted. I think Ms Willis was just going to have a quick look at the actual wording, but there does actually have to be a majority of councillors and staff representatives at Joint Staff Consultative Group for it to be an option to go forward on its own. If there are two options going forward, it generally means that, I say generally, it's usually staff representatives have one view and councillors may have another view, but it could be a slight mix, but it just means the majority hasn't been reached as set out in the constitution of the joint staff. But Rachel, I don't know if you have the exact wording.
Yes, so just to confirm, any decisions should be reached by a simple majority of both the council's representatives and the staff representatives voting separately.
Yeah, just for clarity, the policy, to be fair, and it's the same as the old policy, but it says that the agreement reached at this is under the Employment Committee, that their recommendation will be put forward to the Employment Committee for their approval. It doesn't say that or it doesn't make explicitly clear that the Employment Committee doesn't have to agree with what's agreed at joint staff. They can change it if they so choose. Ditto, so can council. I would quite like that being explicit.
Do you want to respond?
Yeah, just gonna, is there anything in there, Rachel, you need to?
Sorry, just to say that I've just had to sort out the volume in the chamber, so...
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So just coming back, Chair, with regard to that, yes, I appreciate that the Employment Committee could make a different decision, but I think in the spirit of what we were trying to do here is obviously it was about a negotiation to be reached so that there is a joint position to go forward. I appreciate Council does absolutely have the final say with regard to anything that is budgetary, so we can obviously make sure that that is noted in here. But obviously it's just referencing the process with regard to making sure that it feels that it's fair and that we've gone through a fair and representative process. That's the spirit of what we're looking to do.
Okay.
Do you want to?
Yeah, please do.
Sorry, can I just check that anyone joining via Zoom can hear us now?
Okay.
Okay, so are we happy to resolve that we agree this amended pay settlement procedure with the caveats that it will be amended to explicitly reference the Constitution in regard to agreement and explicitly mention the fact that the Employment Committee and the full Council implicitly do not have to agree anything that's put forward? Sorry, the two caveats are that we update the pay settlement procedure, so it includes the constitutional definition of agreement, okay, and it changes the implicit message that the Employment Committee and/or the full council would not necessarily need to agree what was put forward to them, but to make that explicit, to make it explicit that those two committees and that committee and the council would not necessarily approve it.
Yeah, I think that's right. As it reads right now, it almost makes the Employment Committee just a rubber stamp, and that's not how it works now. I know if the joint staff have agreed something, then the chances are the Employment Committee will agree it, but it's not, the committee can't be a rubber stamp.
Can I quickly just come back in, just to, maybe I wasn't particularly clear on my answer. I suppose with regard to the front end of this process, we are asking councillors to be involved in that negotiation, and that includes councillors from the Employment Committee. So it's not doing that negotiation without those committee members as part of it. I fully appreciate once you get into the chamber, that is still something that explicitly you need in that procedure, but it's just sort of saying that that is we're just trying to make sure that there's a lot more upfront conversation rather than it feeling it all in the committee and in the chamber.
Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you. I think it should, just for clarity, that there are, I'm not sure if it is still the same, but the members on joint staff, several members are also on this committee, so it is helpful that not always members of the Employment Committee have the full knowledge of what actually goes on at joint staff and the discussions and various things that happen. But of course, this committee does have a right and also full council does have the right to change things. But I think it's helpful that people are also on joint staff so they can give the background to the discussions and what have you, rather than it being written on paper. Thank you.
Okay, so we happy to resolve that we agree this pay settlement procedure. Thank you. Okay, on to with those two, Kevin. Okay, agenda item 5 then. Electric vehicle as a salary sacrifice scheme. I'm going to hand over to Louise and Julie in a sec. I just wanted to stress at this stage we're just looking for the committee's approval to move forward with this scheme in principle. There'll be a lot of implementation detail which will need to be defined before it's rolled out to staff. At the moment we're just looking for an agreement in principle. So I'll hand over to Julie.
Thank you very much for explaining. Thank you. Thank you very much for explaining. So this is something that we'd like to build out as a benefit to staff, so that we can have a salary sacrifice scheme for staff to purchase a electric vehicle. Now, obviously, it does mean that they get the benefit of the fact that they don't pay tax on the amount of the loan. So, for example, if they were paying £100 a month for the repayment, then they don't pay tax and NI on that £100 payment. So there is a tax incentive for them as well. This is something that's been put together by our climate change officer.
It's really difficult to hear. I'm not quite sure.
I don't know what's going wrong today, but
Yeah, it's like there's no. It's like I was trying to hear from. I can hear you better over there than I can hear from this.
there's no
I
amplification.
can't hear you.
So nothing's happening.
I can hear you talking, but not on here. There's no benefit
The
whatsoever.
volume's been turned down to
I mean,
1.
apart from the fact that it flashes on your name.
Does it work?
You put your,
Does it work better if you bring it closer? Is it just that it's not? Yeah.
Right. Can you hear me now? Yeah? A little bit nearer. There we go. Is that better? Yeah? Okay. The problem is I'm trying to... Oh, I know. The spotlight's on me. No pressure. Thank you very much. So what I was trying to explain is that this is a salary sacrifice scheme that we'd like to bring forward for staff, with the benefit that if they're purchasing a car, electric vehicle, that they... sorry, are you okay? Okay, perfect. So that they've got the benefit of, if they're, say, like paying £100 a month for the repayment of a car, that they don't pay tax on NI. So there's there's an incentive there from a tax perspective, but also it's helping with the climate change work that we're trying to do, as the climate change officer is trying to do at the moment with regards to electric vehicles moving forward. As I said, it is a salary sacrifice scheme and it is a benefit to staff, and that's really why we brought it to Employment Committee today, to see if in theory that you're okay with it, or if you've got any questions, then we'll obviously take those. But as Councillor Black was just saying, this does have to go further along the line, so there will have to be policies built around it moving forward, and that will come through Joint Staff and Employment Committee. So this is just really an outline at the moment of the scheme. All right.
Thank you. Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Chair. At 3.1, it says that Octopus Electric Dreams has been suggested as the best scheme, and on the next page it refers to good reviews on Trustpilot. Has any more due diligence been done on this company, other than what's suggested there?
Sorry. There was another company that we looked at, but forgive me, I can't remember the name of that company. But Octopus has come out at the moment as one of the best users, and also they're giving incentives at the moment with regards to putting the PowerPoint at home and things like that. So there's extra things that staff can benefit from.
Councillor Benton?
Thank you. I think it's a good idea. We do it in my company. We're all electric now. There is one thing that I would question, which is 3.7. Won't be accessible to all members of staff. I did a little searching this afternoon on the good old internet and found that the cost of purchasing the vehicles ranges from about 17,300 up to, if you want a Porsche, 130 something. But the leasing costs start at about, and this is from the RAC leasing cost scheme,
Okay,
so
yeah.
you know it's not gospel, but it is a figure. From £376 a month for a smart car to 600 for a Skoda that costs about the same. So the leasing costs take into account the repairs, the running costs, tyres, everything else. So I think until we get some figures to look at, I don't see why, when you have a Vauxhall Corsa at £390 a month, you know, and that's quite a bit more expensive, but obviously the running costs, hence the lease costs, why we should exclude some members of staff. If they are prepared to sacrifice that amount of money, why couldn't they take benefit?
It's not about excluding staff, and I'm sorry if that's a bit misleading. It's more the fact that the affordability of it, that it's that in itself that will
Yeah.
exclude staff. It's not that we'll go out there and say it's only available to certain criteria of staff. It's not about that, and it's not that you're on a certain level of grade or anything like that.
No.
It is open to all. It's just not, we're saying that it's affordability. It might not be available to all
Yeah,
staff.
but you also have to take into account the cost of a full charge. For example, for a Citroen, the cost of a full charge, according to this, £2.36. How much is a tank of petrol these days? People will be saving hand over fist. Yeah.
So you're suggesting that any affordability test ought to include the cost of fuel?
Well, yeah, it depends how much
Yeah.
mileage you do. I know I'm making a fortune out of money saved by having an electric car. Just,
I have to say the affordability clause on here wasn't absolutely clear to me, but I see it's been taken directly from the Octopus documentation. It talks about the national living wage, which is an hourly rate, and it also talks about the lower earnings limit, which, you know, is set at £533 per month. But when I raised it with the officers, their response was there will be a lot of details that will still need to be determined. If we agree in principle, this will be rolled out. And I think if I was a member of staff, I would want to be very clearly be able to answer the following two questions: how much will it cost me, and am I eligible? And there is some work to do to make that clear to staff. This package is not intended to answer those questions directly.
That's not the intention at this stage, no. The intention is that if in principle you agree to it, and then if we move, you know, as we move forward on this journey, then we will be having, if we agree to Octopus, we will have Octopus come in, they will do demonstrations to staff, staff can ask questions pertinent to themselves. As I said, we will have policies in place to make sure that they agree that when they sign up, that they, you know, for example, you can't be in probationary period and sign up, that kind of thing, so that we're tidying up on all of those sort of things. And that will all come through Joint Staff and then Employment Committee as well. So you'll see further details as we go through the process. But at this stage, it's just about, in principle, are you in agreement that we try and have put this benefit out to staff as a salary sacrifice?
Are you agreeable in principle to the concept that any affordability test needs to be a bit more sophisticated than the one that's written here and incorporate, for example, the offset fuel costs?
Absolutely, and when you sign up with Octopus, they will go through all of that as well. So, for example, you said about the cost of living, you know, people can't go so that they go below that threshold. So there's, you know, there's criteria that's put in as well for that.
yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that anybody could join if they can afford it.
Do you think he's still there? Are you still there, Councillor Bates?
I think Councillor McCafferty's got.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, the point I was going to make has just been made. The key here is that you can't go below the thresholds. So you can't say that every single member of staff will be eligible, because there'll be some who, once they've sacrificed their salary, will go underneath the threshold. So whilst the point is a good one regarding saving of money, the council obviously still has obligations as an employer. So I think that's what the point was. It is highlighted on paragraph 2.4 on page 22. But I think, in fairness, another colleague has just covered it.
Councillor McClafferty?
I'm all in favour of this. I think it's good and we should pursue it. But I think it's important that the outside world doesn't see this as a company car scheme. I think the days of everybody getting company cars are long gone, and I think it would be a terrible message if people assumed. I would like lots and lots of our staff to take up this and get the benefit of it, and great. But I'd hate for it to go outside and look like we've suddenly got 50, 60 staff on company car scheme.
Councillor Wheeler?
Yeah, I think it's important to have charging points for staff, but I do think it's also very important that those charging points are paid for. I don't think it is something that should come off the grid of the council. It's something that should be part of the wider policy. So some assurance on that would be helpful
So
as
you
well,
mean
please.
paid for by the staff? when they
In the
use
same
them?
way that they would be if they went to a public charging, that it shouldn't be provided as an additional benefit.
I'd just like to come back and confirm on both points firstly about company car. It's absolutely not a company car scheme. The employees will be making the payments for that. It's a salary sacrifice scheme. And also I can confirm we do already have 2 charging points in the car park. Staff are required to pay for the electricity and are invoiced for that electricity as per what units that they use. We are actually working with a climate change officer at the moment with regard to, as you know, all EV points are being looked at, and actually that includes the car park here as well, because we may look to upgrade the current system that we've got just to make it easier for use for everybody, not just for staff, that's councillors, and then the public at the weekends when this is a public car park.
Okay, so are we happy to resolve that we agree this with the caveat that the affordability criteria needs to be more nuanced and incorporate the savings in fuel costs? I think that's it. Agreed? Thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Galliford had a hand up.
Thank you. When we were discussing this at joint staff, the staff seemed very keen, which was good news. But I raised the issue of whether it might affect their pension payments. And I believe it's in the paper to double check on that, but I don't know if any further work has been done on that yet either. Thank you.
I'm so sorry, Councillor Galliford. I did check that out, and it doesn't affect the pension payments. The pension payments are made on the gross amount before any deductions are made, so it doesn't affect pension payments. All right, my apologies. You did ask me to come back to you on that.
Councillor Bates?
Sorry, but your amended motion is a problem legally, and I therefore want to gently challenge that, because I understand the point you're making, but you can't actually make that assumption if it still brings the employee under the levels of the national minimum wage. So even though they may make savings over and above that, they still cannot earn less than that. So you can't actually take that into account. So I'm sorry to kind of flag something which I think may be a technical issue, but the salary sacrifice is actually outlined what that means in paragraph 2.4. And I don't think you can legally go below that, even if the person is going to make savings over and above in the way that has been described.
Any comment?
Yeah, just Chair, that is absolutely correct with regard to the minimum wage. I think what we just need to do with regard to this item is I think we just need to make sure that we are being fully transparent with our staff with regard to cost and where they can and can't then be able to take this benefit. Because as I say, it should be only very few that would find themselves in this situation, but it's not the point. The point is that we still need to be clear about that because, as you say, we do have that obligation to our employees. So I think with regard to looking at this, I think, yeah, it's obviously agreeing it in principle, Chair, but obviously also taking on board the point is made. And I think we probably just need to make sure that when we come back, we are very clear around this point and it's clearly laid out about affordability.
Okay. I think the bit that confused me was that they'd thrown the lower earning level in as well. Cool. So we're agreed that legally it's national living wage if you're over 23, the national minimum wage if you're under 23, which is the lower threshold. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor Bates.
I don't think your microphones are working over there. I can hear me, but we can't hear you very well. But just to say, if a member of staff wanted to go ahead and have an electric car and felt confident they could pay it, if they then decide they can't afford to pay it, then will the onus be back on the council? Or, you know, what, if they say, I can't afford it, I don't want it anymore, what will happen? I mean, can the member, you know, if the staff can't pay for it, will the council have to pay for it? Will it come back on it?
It's an agreement that's made with, they have to sign an agreement to say that they can afford the repayments and everything. So it's like if you take out a loan, that's, you know, it is an agreement that they have to sign up to. So, you know, they shouldn't enter into the agreement if they can't. Then we hope that they wouldn't be in that situation, but yes, obviously we would try and see how we can work with them, but it shouldn't be that they can't afford it. Yeah.
I think if there's any reassurance, the electric car. Any assurance, the electric car market is very liquid at the moment. It's not easy, it's not hard to sell an electric car if you have one. So it's not like we'd end up with an asset, that the Octopus would end up with an asset that they couldn't shift. Any more? Are we happy to agree this then? We'll have to back off on that caveat, I think. But, okay, but the point was well made. Okay, so happy to agree it? Thank you very much. Okay. Agenda item 6, post-entry training policy. Please, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an amendment to the post-entry training policy. This policy hasn't been updated for several years. So with all of our policies, we always review periodically. It was last reviewed in 2013. So we've updated the policy. Just a couple of things to point out, which came up through joint staff, that we have amended in line with that feedback. And that includes being very clear about when you need to pay back if you leave the council and when you don't. So it's being made quite clear that if the person leaves through no fault of their own, i.e. redundancy, then they wouldn't be eligible, they don't need to pay that money back. For all other reasons that we can think of, they would need to make the payment as laid out in the table. And it's just sort of making sure that that was quite clear. We also, just with regard to time off, some qualifications don't have exams. They're assessed, they're different assessments. So again, it's just having equal time off as you would for an exam for that assessment, just to make sure that it was balanced. Those were sort of the key points that came out of the post-entry training policy. Again, Chair, happy to take any questions with regard to this. The only thing I will just quickly add, we do use this policy most definitely when we have a skills shortage in the council. So if we need to grow our own and through succession planning, this policy can be very useful with regard to those skills. And we've had quite a lot of success, especially in the past in planning and building control surveyors as well, just to name a couple of examples. And I know accountants as well has also been something that we have done. So just putting that forward, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I had no questions. Councillor Noble.
Thank you. Under section 4, financial assistance, Is any consideration going to be given to childcare costs? Because that could be included as part of the training costs under the tax rules.
It's not something that we have considered and hasn't been something that we have ever included in this policy. It's something we can take away for consideration or depending on what the committee would like us to do.
Councillor Wee was saying she would be supportive of us at least looking into accommodating childcare costs. Councillor Betton.
Speaking.
Thank you. I am. Could I have made a few notes. You talk throughout the document about qualifications. Qualifications, training, having a certificate, passing the course, are all, can we define qualification? If you do an open university course, you come out with a degree at the end. If you go on a training thing, you get a training course for a day, you get a piece of paper that someone has signed and it's very handy, but that's the difference. I think we need to be clear on training and qualification, and that this policy covers all of those things, rather than just obtaining a qualification. On the third paragraph, it said initial applications will be requested by June the 30th of each year. Requested by whom? The manager? The person who wants to be trained? Perhaps it might be clearer just saying that a request must be received by 30th of June and supported by the manager. You know, because otherwise you're asking for the person who is going on the training to request it, whereas it might be the manager saying, I think you need to do this. Yeah. When you're talking about the next paragraph, most cases approval will be granted for the whole duration of the course of study for the qualification. Open university, that goes on for a long time. Are you agreeing up front to pay for the whole course? Because in the paragraph below, it says if it's staged over a number of years, you might be doing it piecemeal. I think you need to be clear on whether it is going to be in stages, you know, because you do modules for an open university course, to get your degree at the end once you've got so many modules. The next thing I have, my scientific training hates adjectives. You have substantial benefit to both the council and the individual. What do you mean by substantial? I think the section on probationary period is absolutely right. You can't be giving external training courses to people while they're on probation. I would imagine that it would be more sensible to have it, they've had to be employed full-time for a period, a year. You know, we don't, in my line of work, we don't look at external training until they've been there a year and we know they're actually going to stay. Then we go to you mentioned about redundancy. If someone is made redundant during the midst of a course, should we consider paying for the completion of that course as part of the redundancy payment? You know, if you're halfway or 3/4 of the way through an Open University course, you get made redundant, which is not the same as being sacked, as we all know. You could be wiping away sort of several years' worth of that person's endeavour. I think if we're going to make somebody redundant, we need to have the morals courage to say, sorry about this, but, you know, we're not ruining your future as well. And then just you mentioned the bit about the up to 12 months of the, if they leave after 12 months, they have to pay down. Perfectly understandable, perfectly reasonable. But you've got the same thing twice in here. I think the second one could go.
I seem all like fair points and questions.
So, yeah, that's all the comments that I would make about this. I think it's a really good idea.
Councillor McClafferty,
I'm
you've got
fully
something
in
as well.
support of it, but just with those changes.
I've got 7 or 8 points that I would like to make. Actually, just in reply to Councillor Bettins, I don't think you have to define certification if you pass or not. I think that's just, that's words for the sake of words there, I think. Everybody knows that you get a certificate or you pass a course or you get your degree. The point about requested by the manager or the staff member, one of my pet hates is when I was a trainer, I used to ask people why they were on the course, and half the people on the course said, I don't know. And it was because the manager put them on the course and they didn't particularly want to be on it. I think the only thing that should be clear in this is that the member of staff wants to be on the training, right? And managers shouldn't put people on training who don't want to be there. It's an utter, complete waste of time. Modular versus annually is correct. You're right. Are we committing to a course that could be 4 years? Or are we committing to a course that we'll look at each year and decide? Probably both, I think. You're probably saying, yeah, we'll put you on a 4-year course for I can't imagine, you're using Open University, why not? But it would have to be that you pass each year. You know, if you fail the first year, we're not going to put you on the second one, etc. So annually. I'm an engineer, but I'm okay with the word substantial. If you want to change it to significant, that's okay. Right? You know, the world is full of adjectives, and you know, substantial is sometimes flexibility is good. I don't think you should wait. If somebody's done their 3 months probation, I don't know why you would wait another 9 months to put them on training that we actually want them to have. So for me, once they've done their probation, then it's worth the risk. And you know, if it's right that they go on the training, they go on the training. Redundant, that's a really interesting one about if we make you redundant. For me, I would say if the person has done, say, 3 years of 4 or 9 months of 12, you know, they're well over the hump. I actually think it's not a bad idea that we look at giving them something that just says, we'll let you finish that training. We'll support you to finish that training. But if they're in year 1 of a 4-year course, then no. So I think there could be wording around, you know, substantially finished the training, okay? All right? And I agree entirely. You've said the 12 months, 18 months, 24 months table is twice, and I couldn't agree with my colleague more that it should be just the one.
Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the point on redundancy, that was actually a point which I also was concerned about at joint staff. And as a result of which, if you look on page 34, at the top of that page is the new wording that covers this particular point. Because the point that Councillor Better made is very fair, I think. If it is a redundancy, that is no fault of the employee. And therefore, the council should not, if you like, honour that, and the employee should not repay any of the funding provided for the training. However, if, for example, they're doing a course lasting some time, they're then dismissed through disciplinary reasons, then they would be prepared to repay the funding if they leave the service of the council under the terms which are outlined lower on that page. And that seems to me quite fair. The issue that we had, which wasn't in the policy before, was that it wasn't covered, and I think like both of the previous speakers, it should be covered. We shouldn't penalise staff if we are the ones making the decision. I should say that, in fact, very few people are made redundant by the council, so I'm not expecting that this will necessarily be used that often, but nonetheless, I think it is a fairness issue. I wouldn't agree with adding, a percentage of however much time it is, because again, it depends on whether it's the fault of the person or not. If someone's made redundant after, 6 months, that is the council's issue, not the employees. So I don't think they should have to repay under those circumstances, but if it is disciplinary, then they should.
So just to clarify for Councillor Bates, and I did do a quick wave to Councillor Betton to see. Councillor Bates, we all agree the point about if they're terminated, they don't have to pay the money back. Councillor Betton's suggestion was that if they were in that training, perhaps we should continue to fund their training after they've left the employ of the council. And my suggestion was, if they had only just started the training, then I don't think so. But if they were substantially through the training, nearing the end, then it's something that we could consider. So this was in addition to the point you've just made, not instead of.
Okay. I think I understand the point that you're making. And yes, within a wider employment package, that might be something to consider on a discretionary basis, although discretion is obviously a sensitive area anyway when you're looking at this sort of thing. So I do kind of understand the point that you're going through with that. I think the key area, though, is trying to, when you're looking at leave and employment, usually these fees are paid in advance. So, or they should be paid in advance. So, how long? I'm not sure it's going to be that often that you're actually going to be referring to. So, I don't have necessarily a major issue if you're going to look at that particular issue, but I'm not sure it's going to be that relevant.
I think I'm thinking predominantly about someone doing an Open University course where you do it in modules and you take your own time and you get the degree at the end of it. And if, as Councillor McClafferty suggested, we don't pay the whole thing up front, but we do it in modules in terms of payment, then that does make a difference to someone who's being made redundant. That's my point.
Thank you. Can I get the officers' thoughts, please? There's quite a lot there.
Yeah, there is quite. There was just a couple of things, and I think it's just that particular point, Councillor Betton. I just wanted to give an example currently where we do have somebody going through Open University, and we are agreeing it in 2-year phases. We're not agreeing it, as you say, because I think it's a 6-year course that the person's actually looking at. It's also done that way for the person themselves as well, so they're not tying themselves in for that huge number of years and then feeling that they can't actually get out of it because they've got a lot of costs then attached to it. If we need to, we can make that a little bit clearer in just the way we've set out, because we absolutely are always looking at it. It's the balance between the two items. Did you want me to come back on the other items, or shall I wait for Councillor Noble? But I think I've noted down the different points, but happy to answer anything if it doesn't feel like it's been answered from my perspective.
Are you thinking, I'll ask Councillor Noble in a minute, are you thinking we need to go through another review cycle on this?
Chair, no, I don't think so, because these are all additions. They're all, I think, improvements to the process that we're actually looking at. We're not looking at taking anything
Okay,
away.
so as long as we can define
Yeah.
what we're going to change, we're happy with that.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on what Councillor Betton and Councillor McClafferty said about the deadline of the 30th of June, I'm just conscious that there is a skills gap, and if we identify somebody that has a skills gap and we've got a deadline of the 30th of June, we might be delaying the opportunity for someone to train by having that 30th of June restriction on there. I appreciate for budgetary reasons we want to know how much we're going to be spending, but if there's a budget put aside, I don't know why we have to have a 30th of June cut-off date for it.
Thank you, Councillor Noble, and thank you, Councillor. They are actually, it's a really good point, and apologies I didn't come back on that. So the reason for the 30th of June is it runs with the appraisal process, and that is the main appraisal, setting the appraisal for that year. So we use the 30th of June as that initial looking at what courses are available. Now, a number of these are qualifications, and majority of the time they're due to start in September. So they're still sort of from that college or university, and they're usually running through that process. But I should, and I will add into the policy, that is not the only time that we would consider a post-entry training application. Because as I say, otherwise we are being completely inflexible about if we need a particular skill, then we're sort of shooting ourselves in the foot with that. So I appreciate that, but I appreciate the policy does not tell you that. So I will make sure that is updated to reflect that point. Thank you.
Okay, so we've iterated a few points back and forth. Are we in a position to sort of summarise where we think we might have got to?
I'll give it a go. Okay, just to clarify a number of points here that have been raised and changes that we will make as a result of this discussion. So we'll be clear with regard to the date that we are taking post-entry qualifications, so that is a lot clearer with regard to that item. I'm not going to be adding in it being a year before somebody takes on a course, because again, this is for a skill, can be for a skill shortage, and that's another reason why we would need it. We will look at adding the point about, if made redundant, looking at where the qualification has got to with regard to, and just making sure that it's explicit in the policy that that would be considered. With regard to the modules, I'm going to tidy up the definition and give an example around the Open University point that's made for the period. I know we've talked about a period of time, but I will just tidy up that definition so it is a lot clearer. I think those were all of the points, Chair, that I was going to look to change, unless the committee feel there was something I have.
Are we going to think about childcare costs?
Oh, apologies. Yep, apologies, Chair. Yep, and we're also going to look at the consideration of supporting childcare costs. Thank you, sorry.
Are we agreed that we can resolve to approve that with those changes? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 7, pay policy statement. Apparently this is something we need to do legislatively. It's a requirement of the Localism Act. Yeah?
Correct.
Okay, I'll hand over to you. Julie, beg your pardon.
Thank you. So as you quite rightly just said, this is something that we have to publish on our website every year. It's very factual. There's been amendments to reflect the change of job titles following the senior management restructure last year. And the figures in there, obviously just factual figures. So I'm just open for any questions, really.
We did have a discussion about the. It's hard to read because it's got the change in the nomenclature, but the mean average salary has gone from 39,500 to 50,000 in the year. And when I queried that, we believe the answer is because a number of staff in community services transferred to Runnymede, so they're no longer employees of Surrey Heath.
Chair, I can confirm that yes, that is exactly why that figure has changed, and they are on the lower grade. So again, we've assessed that and rechecked our calculations. Okay. It is not for any reason that any large salary increases have taken place, because that is definitely not.
I did have a look at the Runnymede figures as well, and although they don't publish their mean salary, they do publish their ratios, and their ratio has gone down slightly, which would be consistent with that understanding.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor McClafferty.
I think I was going to raise that point. It's a gigantic jump, isn't it? 11k in 1 year. I think it would be perfectly at liberty to put an asterisk next to that number and put just under the table saying number of lower paid staff transferred to our partner, Runnymede, etc. And just leave it at that. I think it's too easy to jump to the conclusion that massive salaries have gone in.
Sorry, microphone off. Agreed, thank you. Okay, agenda item 8, which is our work programme.
Thank you, Chair. So this lays out the work programme for the rest of the year, and I just wanted to raise and bring to attention a couple of points for councillors. Christmas closure has been put in there. That was discussed at joint staff, but it was deferred from this meeting, and this is setting Christmas for from 2023 onwards, not for this year, because that's already been agreed. So I just wanted to make sure that it was actually in the programme and that was coming back. There's also another item that we picked up on the minutes that was deferred, which was a social media policy. And apologies, Chair, for not picking this up when you went through the minutes. So it's my mistake. Apologies, I've just looked at my notes. And so we will make sure that that goes on to the 13th of October because it was a deferral. So apologies, committee, for not bringing that policy back to this committee as was requested at the time. So we will action that and make sure that is put in. The only other point to raise is obviously there is pay negotiations on there, and obviously with regards to the agreement of the new pay procedure today, we will be looking to start those pay negotiations and start that process off, so we can then come back to the Employment Committee with where we are with that new policy.
Has anyone got anything else? Okay, so we can resolve to agree this work programme. With the amendments, yeah. Okay, with added social media to that 13th of October meeting. Okay, and what do we do at the end? That's the end of the meeting. Okay, that's the end of the meeting. Meeting is closed. Thank you very much.